Channel's Weekend Review. War between Israel and Hamas, why this time may be different, the Manhattan Project in song, remembering Tommy Ramone and his Jewish heritage, and more of the Jewish news that's changing your world right now in this episode of the Weekend Review. Hello and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Weekend Review. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. As we go to air this week, Israel is still at war. An effort at an Egypt-negotiated ceasefire failed Tuesday when dozens of rockets from Gaza continued to be shot into Israel. Israel resumed its attacks on Gaza after 6 hours of abiding by the ceasefire. Secretary of State John Kerry criticized Hamas in strong terms, saying, quote, "I cannot condemn strongly enough the actions of Hamas in so brazenly firing rockets in multiple numbers in the face of a goodwill effort to offer a ceasefire in which Egypt and Israel work together that the international community strongly supports." While Israel has launched incursions into Gaza several times since Hamas gained control of the territory in 2007, there are several reasons to think that Operation Protective Edge, as Israel has called its current effort, may be different. First, there is the greater degree of isolation of Hamas. Whereas recently as last year, Hamas could rely on a supportive Egyptian government in the form of the Muslim Brotherhood, Egypt is now keeping the border between itself and Gaza so tightly closed that even Egyptians are often not able to make it back into Egypt from Gaza. And where Hamas has previously been able to avoid explicit condemnation by the Fatah party that controls the West Bank, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas criticized the effort to attack Israel on Palestine TV, asking, quote, "What are you trying to achieve by sending rockets?" And later answering, quote, "We prefer to fight with wisdom and politics." This is perhaps unique in Palestinian history to have a leader of one party so clearly questioning the efforts at harming civilians by another party. Abbas did clarify that he's displeased with Israel's bombing efforts, as well as calling it, quote, "unacceptable that the Gaza Strip should undergo this type of aggression every 2 years," unquote. Abbas summarized his sentiments by stating, quote, "It's not important who wins or loses. What's important is to end this bloodshed." Alongside this isolation of Hamas, the Egyptian government's clampdown on weapons smuggling into Gaza and the Palestinian Authority's further efforts at seeking legitimacy as a governing power on the world stage, Israel's military efforts could for the first time in a long time be perhaps striking a finite set of targets. If Israel successfully removes enough of Hamas's firepower, there's a legitimate question of whether Hamas will be able to restore firepower when this is over. At the same time, Israel is being more directly criticized for the civilian casualties it is generating than at perhaps any other time. The clarity of the data and its spread across more media outlets and social media is distinct from past conflicts. These data show the vast majority of those killed are civilians, with more than a quarter of those killed being children. Here in the United States, elected officials from New York gathered to express their solidarity with Israel. Here's some of what was said there.
We're here in solidarity with the state of Israel and their right to defend themselves as any country should.
I'm here to tell you as the ranking member of the House of Representatives Foreign Affairs Committee that support for Israel in the United States Congress is strong and it's bipartisan.
And I want to assure you that no money from our committee will go to a potential, quote, unity government when Hamas is in the back room directing the affairs and not speaking out against the rockets.
No country can sit idly by while its neighbor hurls missiles over its border. No people can tolerate being used for target practice. Israel had to act.
Israel has gone far beyond what we have seen any other country do in trying to protect the civilian population of its enemy. That human lives have been lost in the process is a tragedy. But that is entirely Hamas's fault, not Israel. Hamas, not Israel, is responsible for Palestinian civilian casualties.
This event today attracted some people that have a different view. They surround us right now.
Occupation now! End the occupation now!
To them I would ask, what is it that Hamas is offering you and your children? What is it that Hamas is trying to promote? The answer, of course, is Islamic rule and the desire to drag us all back to the Dark Ages.
We will continue to pray and stand with the nation of Israel and with the Palestinians who stand for peace. It is clear that Israel's conflict is not with the Palestinian people. It is with the Hamas terrorists in Gaza.
So I say to the leaders of the civilized world who say they have no stomach for war, who urge restraint, who are not living with the constant blare of rocket attack sirens, wake up. The savagery of Hamas and its kind cannot be tamed with reason.
Moving on, 2 new off-Broadway plays explore the Jewish experience while engaging activities as diverse as building a nuclear bomb and making a better rock and roll recording. Meredith Ganzman has that story.
Bomb could be jeopardizing your children's lives.
We can't just do nothing.
To use the bomb will cost us all.
2 new musicals with Jewish stories are opening off-Broadway this month. There's Atomic, a musical telling of the making of the atomic bomb and one of its lesser-known Jewish creators, Leo Szilard, and Piece of My Heart, also a biomusical about Jewish rock and roll writer and producer Bert Burns. Both musicals explore some of the greatest untold stories of their time.
Leo is a scientist that was sort of written out of history.
Jeremy Kushner plays Leo Szilard. If Robert Oppenheimer was the father of the atomic bomb, Leo Szilard was the godfather. The making of the atomic bomb would not have been possible without Szilard's patents and inventions. Piece of My Heart tells the story of Bert Burns, who wrote several #1 hits of the 1960s. You'll recognize his songs, even if you don't recognize his name. Zach Resnick plays Burns.
They're definitely going to come see the show and be like, oh my God, this song, I know that song. Oh man, he wrote this. Oh my God, this song. I mean, it's going to be, the whole show's going to be like that.
Burns and Szilard are 2 very different central characters, but both are historical figures who are lesser known than their famous creations. Szilard fought against the use of the atomic bomb after playing a role in inventing it. Ewan Morton plays Robert Oppenheimer.
I think a lot of these characters, towards the end of their lives, found a lot of guilt and a lot of regret about what had transpired with the bomb.
Despite his numerous hits, Bert has yet to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Piece of My Heart follows Burns' daughter Jessie as she discovers a connection with the father she never knew through his music. Burns' other children collaborated on the production.
His closest friends and family feel like we really have brought him back in this character on the living stage.
And on both stages, rock and roll music scores the production. Philip Foxman wrote Atomic's music, marrying a period piece with contemporary styles.
It's got to be big, it's got to be dynamic, and that's rock music.
For the companies of both shows, the production's Jewish themes resonate loudest.
I feel like I've learned more about the spirituality of being Jewish during this show.
To learn more about Atomic and Piece of My Heart, tune into the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Meredith. Punk rock icon Tommy Ramone passed away this week at the age of 65. In 2009, TJC's Christian Needham reported on a panel in which Ramone and others recalled their Jewish heritage. Here is some of what Ramone shared that night.
One of the biggest regrets of my life is my mother spoke Yiddish, but my father didn't. And so I never learned Yiddish. And it's something I really wish, because to me it seems like such a wonderful, colorful language. I would love to have been able to speak Yiddish. In Brooklyn, I actually went to the Lubavitcher Yeshiva, which is Hasidic, but I wasn't myself Hasidic, so that was kind of strange. Because in Hungary, we led a pretty secular life, and then we came to the United States, and it was kind of a cultural thing that I went through, which I actually never really got a handle on. It's kind of warped me in several ways.
Have you ever thought about going to Israel?
Yeah, sometimes. It's, obviously a place where you should spend a lot of time, since it's such a deeply ingrained culturally and historically and religiously. There's so much depth there of everything that it's a place that I certainly should go and see.
Finally this week, looking at the Israeli immigrant experience from 2 very different perspectives is the theme of Up Close. For many young Jews immigrating to Israel today, the hope of finding a Jewish mate is a major goal. The mix of disappointments around that search is the topic of a short story collection by Yael Unterman, The Hidden of Things. Meanwhile, from a political and ideological perspective, many immigrants these days find themselves identifying with the writings of the man perhaps most responsible for the development of Israel's right wing, Zev Jabotinsky. But a new biography by Hillel Halkin paints Jabotinsky in a new light. Here are some of the highlights from my interview with Yael Unterman. Singles. Jewish singles. Orthodox Jewish singles. Talk about how that single scene develops over there.
Oh, well, I'm not sure how it developed. Weirdly enough, actually, my parents lived in probably the proto-single scene there about 40 years ago, but they were lucky enough to find each other. I think that just English-speaking people gravitated to those neighborhoods of Katamon, Rehavia, because they were just lovely neighborhoods. They are full of what we call Anglo-Saxons, right, English-speaking immigrants. And many of those were single, and somehow the concentration of singles in Jerusalem does tend to be around those areas of Jerusalem, of Rehavia, Katamon, and Baka. I don't know exactly how these things developed. It's actually a sociological question. There really is this is almost like it's an anthropological topic. There is a community here, a tribe with customs, etc.
And in your first story, you talk about specifically that idea of what happens when all of a sudden there's the most minimal touching on a date, and how that, for these extremely Orthodox people, it can be jarring.
Jarring, dramatic, sensual, they're very, very sensitized. And there's something beautiful about that. When, in today's world, sex has become very, very cheap and very easy. And when you watch a movie, you expect the heroes to jump into bed within, the first few minutes of getting to know each other. And here you've got a society where, in my first story, there is a woman who is not at all expecting to be touched by men. And when somebody comes close with something even the least bit intimate, it affects her profoundly. And there's something amazing about that.
And that's also one of the more disturbing things, because investing in yourself, in a sense, and figuring out who you really want to be would seem to be a first step towards coupling off, not some step after you've failed at coupling off, right?
Right. You're right, and there's a problem there. In other words, the messages that are given by society are, go to college, prepare yourself for a career, and to women maybe start to prepare yourself, to be a mother. And there's an expectation probably that it will happen soon afterwards. And I don't think sufficient guidelines are provided for people to just start building and creating themselves. In fact, people might be scared to do that, to start really investing in who they are, because what if I meet someone whose life trajectory is different, especially probably for women, whose role still, look, in modern circles, the role of women is changing in modern Jewish circles, but their role still is probably more expected to be secondary to, let's say, the husband's job or whatever. And so if they invest in themselves and create a glorious career, what happens when they get married and they have to stop it because of the children, etc.? So that's in the back of a lot of people's minds. And yet, on the other hand, I do believe that today there are lots of young men and women who are just setting out to be who they are in the world and want to meet someone from within that.
You can see the full episode of Up Close on the Jewish channel on cable. You can also listen to the full audio of Up Close as a podcast, available on iTunes or in your favorite podcast player. That's all for this week. From all of us here at the Jewish Channel, be well. The Jewish Channel is available on cable. Time Warner Cable Channel 528, IO Optimum Channel 505, RCN Channel 268, Bright House Channel 330, Verizon Fios Channel 900, Cox Cable Channel 1, Frontier Communications, and on Comcast in the on-demand menu under Premium Channels. For more information, visit tjctv.com.